And we are recording. And welcome and thank you again for coming again. Faces I've seen before. It's really lovely to have you back. Just letting a few more people in with my adept admission skills there. Um, Today we're having another lunchtime session, so I'm going to keep this in under 40 minutes. As usual, I'm trying to simplify a workshop that I might take 3 hours to deliver. But you're all amazing, intelligent humans who are going to get something for this anyway. So what's really helpful before we begin is if I have a sense of where you are in your understanding of regenerative business. So give me a 5 in the chat if you're like, oh, I've done a bit of reading and I know a bit, but I've got a lot more to learn. Give me a sort of, an 8 to 10 if you're like, I am so on this journey. I am, no worries, Virginia. Thanks for letting us know. I know quite a bit, and just put yourself somewhere there. Or if you're at the beginning, give me a 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. Thank you. 5. Fantastic. So that means people are starting to get a sense of this. I am so excited about these numbers because I would say even a year ago still, everyone was still under 5. So it's very, yes, Rebecca, you are definitely on the 7, 8. So we've got, I know for people who I do know here, we've got people, yes, Rosalie, you love the books by Giles. Have you been in the woods there as well? Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to get into this thing that I call the Regenerative Business Canvas, and I'll just give you a little bit of history. One of the things I've experienced as a mentor is probably the biggest stumbling block for people in making this transition over what I call the bridge. I use a lot of bridge iconography, those of you who know me. It's like, what's that bridge from where I am now to where I'm trying to be? And what is the bridge from sustainability to regeneration? Is that even the right bridge I should be crossing? All these questions, some people are having an experience. It sounds a bit spiritual. It sounds a bit, niche. People are still grappling with this, but I'm on a huge mission this year to make sure people get what it is, because I truly believe this is the path for systemic change. I believe that with all my heart, and I could talk about it for hours, but I won't. What I try to do instead is take some very potentially complex ideas or challenging ideas and provide simple bridges for us to implement them straight away. So the thing about business, this is what I've learned in all my years of either doing business, which for those who have just met me is over 3 decades of running companies in the sustainability space. Not that I knew it was called that, I just did what I did. We've done product businesses and service businesses and always had cradle to grave supply chains. I was a fan of John Elkington's work in the late 90s. I probably was guided by that. Huge fan of Anita Roddick at the Body Shop. She was my major inspiration because I was a human rights activist and I thought, oh, if she can do it, I can go into business. So that's kind of a broad brushstroke of where I've come from. And what I often say to people is, I don't have an epiphany story. A lot of people do, and I think it's really powerful, but I don't. I just kind of always knew the system was shitty and I wanted to try and do it differently. So I've kind of come from this from a different space. About been mentoring for about 12 years, full-time for about 6 or 7 years. And what I find is people get blocked on this idea of business plans or what to include or how to have the impact. So slowly I've developed frameworks around this to help people create a regenerative business. So the canvas I'm going to show you is a way you can do that. So you can kind of map it from the beginning. So that's the idea behind it. And hopefully you find it incredibly helpful and you have your paper and pen, because we're going to draw, because that's what you do when you're with me. We always end up doing something creative. And if we're with each other in person, we end up in the forest. So yeah. Okay, so I'm going to just do a little, I'm going to pick up, some people were here last week, so I'm going to pick up a bit from where we were. Welcome, Rachel, who doesn't have her heating on and is well wrapped up by other means. I love it. Okay. Rachel and I had a chat last week and realized we had all these people in common. Some of you are on this call today, so that was really nice. I'm going to share because that's what I do. Just let me know when you're looking at the front slide so I know we're all on the same page. Great. I'm just going to now take your beautiful faces away so that the people on the recording can see the slides. Okay. So I've given, just for those who have just arrived, I've just given some background to this, but I want to pick up where we were. This is where we were last week. And here's an example. Someone sent me one of the trees they drew, and on the right, you'll see the kind of biomimicry, biophilia approach we took to looking at the foundations of our business, the trunk being the strength and the branches being all the flowery stuff, the stuff we want and that other people see. So that's where we left off. And I want to start here because it's going to lead beautifully onto some of the themes we do today. So don't worry if you weren't here last week. I can send you a recording if you'd like one. Just all you have to do is ask me later on. Don't ask me now because I'll forget. And here we go. So we're going to do a bit. When you look at this image, and I know all of you do go for walks in the woods, I know you sense that feeling, that indescribable sense of beauty. Your breath just relaxes. And you kind of know that there's some kind of connection. We just maybe didn't know there was this word biophilia that explained it. And some people would argue we don't need a word, and they would be right. And others would argue we do, because if we're all in the business of communicating the importance of connecting to nature, and for some people it really helps to understand the science and the research behind this sense of connection. So that is why we bring that terminology into this session. But yes, for those who think it's not necessary, absolutely. But it's people get science and it helps them understand it. So while you get that, so I've got a little bit of echoing. Is anyone else hearing echoing? I'm not sure why. No, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just needs to go.
Fantastic. You're looking at a couple of images of trees, and the reason for that is this. The one on the left is one I saw a lot when I first came to England. For those of you, my accent is Australian. I arrived in England 6 years ago. And it was kind of quite normal, I found, to people go, there's the tree, like the one tree that was in the farm or up on the hill. And I was like, okay. That was kind of a new experience for me. It's not, obviously on farms in Australia, we see single trees, but this was nature, apparently. But I'm going to show you another way to look at a tree in a minute, but I want you to just sense into the fact that you would just call this a tree, because it is. But what you're actually looking at is Western ways of thinking, which is we see what's above the ground, and we may not see the life within it and around it. Later on, and these are broad brushstrokes. It is a one-dimensional way of looking at it. It is a little bit singular, and that makes it easy for people to see this tree as a commodity or resource. And we have been trained, as we learnt last week, I won't go into that again, to think of things individually, to be individualistic, to be competitive. How we learnt within our education system, everything was to see things as singular. And that has contributed to the ability and the okayness, to use a highly technical word, the okayness to use a tree as a commodity, and for us to justify why we can see it as a commodity. But there's another way to look at things, and that's a more of an Indigenous worldview. And I could not find an image without using AI. It has its place, people, to really get this across to you, that this is how an Indigenous person, I've spent a lot of time with Indigenous people, both in Sami land in northern Norway and in Australia. And it took me a long time to get this. And they didn't give up trying to teach me that they don't see a tree by itself. They see a tree in all its life. They see the beings inside the tree, the unseen. They see the people connected to the tree, the deep roots. So and often many environmentalists, no matter what your background is, will also see a tree like this. And that's why people will sit up a tree for 2 years to stop it being cut down. But it's been very much considered what I call the other in society. So we're going to get to a business plan in a minute, believe it or not. But I just want you to just sense into this idea of otherness that's so ingrained in us that we don't even realize it. So what would happen, and this is one of the things I do when I take people forest bathing, is what happens when we get out magnifying glasses and we look deep into the tree and we actually see this life that exists. So this is very much more of a holistic worldview and ecosystem approach that we looked at last week in the workshop, and very much what we call regenerative thinking, regenerative business. So it just gives you a bit of eases you into a regenerative way of thinking by the time we get to this business canvas. So when we apply this to business, and those of you who have been reading books, you'll recognize some of these words. Old paradigm might be to see things as singular and not part of an ecosystem. Some people have used the words in academia like colonial and Western ways of thinking. But when we look at regenerative business, you're hearing words like indigeneity and new paradigm. And that's because we want to become those people who think of things as an entire ecosystem, not as a singular resource. This is our natural capital. And this is one of the reasons we've found it very easy for nature to degrade around us. It's happened so slowly. And protecting nature was once considered an ethical obligation of a small amount of people. But of course, we're living in times where we realize it's directly affecting us and we can't even run our businesses effectively without bringing nature into our boardrooms now. So when I take people forest bathing, on the left, this is what we might pick up. We might just walk past trees and see the lichen. We may find little branches on the ground like the yellow lichen. And we pick this up, and when I give people magnifying glasses, and that's what, when they look, the image on the right is what they see. And when I do this with people, I've had reactions from a simple wow and amazement to people's hearts and minds being completely cracked open. And this supports the research that have come out of forest bathing and places like the University of Derby that tell us when we feel connected to nature, we are more likely to invest in it and want to save it and to work with it and to see it as part of our lives and our businesses. So this is the purpose of the Nature's Boardroom and the forest bathing that I do with business people, because they see a whole world. But when you walk past a tree now, we just walk past the image on the left. Oh, there's a bit of lichen. We may or may not notice it. There's whole worlds happening. So you start to see how the indigenous holistic regenerative worldview of a tree is that it's part of an ecosystem and that it's full of life rather than a commodity. So that's just a little bit of background that picks up on what we were talking about last week, and it's going to lead us beautifully into what we do today. I might just see if there's any questions before we go forward. I'll just come back into the room briefly. Everyone following along, any questions? Yeah, we're good. Fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, here we go. So let's look at a traditional business plan. And a little bit of background to this is when I first started mentoring, the question that came up for me was, how come some people have a successful business and other people don't? And what even is a successful business? And it kept coming up for me. And I kept seeing people get stuck. And the reason people were stuck is because they were following very much a traditional idea of how to do a business. And they felt like a success or a failure based on the trajectory and the system and the business planning that they were being told in every business book and every person they spoke to. This is how you do it. And if you don't do it well, you're a failure. And if you do it well, it's because you got a lot of money out of it. So that started really eating away at me because I'd never run my businesses like that, much to the chagrin of some of my investors. So that really stuck with me. And then slowly over the years, I've developed this new way of approaching business planning. So here we go. So I'm being very broad brushstroke here, so please forgive the generalizations. As I say, we only have a short amount of time. But I hope you would generally agree that this is typically a kind of image people might come to mind of business people. It's very much an office-based situation. There's a service where there is a profit, and there's usually a mission involved, and there's some marketing that connects people to this service and product. There's a sales process. That's pretty much a variation on that, and I'll show you a bit more of a comprehensive version of this in a minute, but I just wanted to start very broad brushstroke. The regenerative way of thinking is quite different. We think, what is the value we are providing and receiving? So we need a balance of both. So part of value is income and profit. We need to sustain ourselves in the capitalist system we live in. But what is the value going both ways? So what is the value I'm providing and receiving? So we talk about value more than profit usually, but we do talk about profit, and you'll see that in a moment. But we think about the conditions for growth. what conditions, just like a beautiful garden, what conditions could you create that would inevitably and naturally allow that business to grow? And we're always looking for simplicity and understanding simplicity in what is essentially a complex living system. So that is very broadly the difference between the two. Now, this traditional business planning has its place. I'm not advocating to throw it out. I'm advocating to see it in context. But if this is all you're doing, no wonder you're feeling stuck. Now, an impact-driven business might add a few more things here around purpose and giving and charity. I find those add-ons often hold people within the old paradigm still. So that's just a personal opinion, and we can have that discussion another time. But just to explain my perception of that. So I like to get down to the fundamentals. If this is the fundamental that you're still working with, I find it does still bring up old problems. So typically it would look like this. I did my last business plan for a company in 2020, actually. It was online, that's right. And I remember at the end of it thinking, I'm never doing that again. That's my last one, doing it traditionally. And often they do sit on shelves. People don't always look at them. They forget to look at them. But it helps us get investment. It helps us with our thinking. They absolutely have their place, but I'll get to what I think the place is in a minute. So that's a traditional business plan, a bit more of a extensive than the broader brushstroke that I mentioned before. Where I think this belongs, where I think this has a place is in the trunk. Now, for those who were at the workshop last week, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So the trunk provides the strength. It's where the people and the processes, and without that strength, it's really difficult for the branches and the leaves to grow. We can't fruit without that trunk. It's a very important role, but it's not the whole role. So by showing you this image, I guess I'm asking you to consider that would be pretty weird if we just saw a forest full of trunks with no roots and no leaves. And so my proposition to you today, and this is an invitation, a proposition to consider. You don't have to agree with me, but it's a proposition that this is simply the trunk part of a business. I also, by the way, don't like the word SWOT analysis. I don't know about any of you, but whenever you're sort of forced to look at threats, the T stands for a threat, for those who don't know. I remember always struggling with, and why am I being forced to look at threats? So I just think that's a really not useful way of thinking. But I do think uncertainties are a useful thing, which is how I replace that word. Then we have the leaves. Okay, this is where everything is fruiting, and this is where we're, feeling successful or feeling like we're having impact. It's the growth that other people see. So this is the external facing of a business, and I think this absolutely has its place in this aspect of a tree. But a lot of people want to start there. I'm going to build a website. I'm going to get some clients. I need a certain amount of income. I need to do some advertising, and they haven't been in the trunk or even in the roots, which is where we're going to go in a minute. So that's just a little theory of mine. So when I work with people, I don't like just starting with these things, and this is why. This is often, as I showed you earlier, the domain of what we might call an impact-driven business, and it's often an add-on, as I said a few slides ago. I actually think if we start to look at this as our soil, as our mycelium, and actually how we create the conditions, this is where things start to get really interesting. And this is where I begin regenerative business planning from. And this is the invitation you're going to have today. So I wanted to use that slide to make it fit with the others for now, but I'm going to take you to a much more beautiful place to do the exercise. So this becomes the ecosystem. They're all parts of a business plan. They're all connected to a sense of success and impact, but they absolutely, from where I see it, if we think of it in terms of different parts of the tree, it helps us understand where we should put our attention. So I'll just give you a minute to cast your eyes upon that. And if you're wondering what the gold stars are, that's what I call the alchemy of business, because one of the extraordinary things I find that happens in regenerative business planning is a lot of alchemy, things you can't quite explain, where things just come together in a very beautiful incredible way. Okay. So again, broad brushstroke, not going into big detail, but I know you all get where we're going with this. So what do we do with that and where do we go next? What does a regenerative business canvas actually look like? Well, it's not a series of rectangles, because even in the design of a plan, as you can start to see from the mind mapping look, we want to, even in how we do it, the process that we use, we want that to be different. It helps us have different thinking. And this is how it looks to me. Now, just to give you a context for this, I've just been with someone before this workshop for an hour, and we only got round 3 of these circles. This does take time, but I do think that you can do a general high-level mapping in some short time that we have here today, because I just want to get you the concept, and the invitation is to take this away and see what you can do with this. This is something we do, we spend a lot of time on in the growth experience. So I'm just going to sort of stop and check in to see if there's any questions, and then we're going to get into this exercise. So how are we doing? Rebecca, is your hand up for a reason?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, you've got nature in the center. Is that what you would say rather than business, having nature in the center of that circle rather than your business in the center of that circle? Is that purposeful?
Yeah, very purposeful. When I first drew this up, I had nature as one of the circles, and it kept bugging me, and I didn't know why. Because often when things are emerging, you've just got to be playful and just see, what frustrates you, what's annoying, what isn't quite feeling right about a design. I know you've got a few designers in the room, you know what I mean? Sort of like, hang on a second, it doesn't quite go there. And then I realized if we're talking about life-centered businesses, which is the fundamental principle of regenerative business, how do we create how do we design and participate in a life-centric business? Nature had to be at the middle of it for me. So I know you've seen some of my circles where I have a much more alchemic design in the middle, where there's a lot around leadership and intuition, which is also important when you're in the minutiae of doing the design. But I think as a general canvas, what I'm advocating here essentially is, I'm a huge fan of impact reports, so I'm not criticizing them for those who, if it comes out sounding like this. But I think when we're doing an impact report, it's an addition. Like it's going, here's the business, but here's the impact. And it's actually not like that in often cases, because I know so many businesses that the impact's integral to what they do. But when we're calling it an impact report, the very nature of that process says that it's separate. Does that make sense? And so this is the kind of the way I think, and the things that bug me. And I think, okay, so how do we bring that into the design of the business rather than it being a good nice have? And there's a couple of people here whose whole businesses are based around collaboration and the sharing economy and circular economy. I see you, and it's like, that's you putting life at the center of the business. So I'm just intrigued by how we accidentally keep showing up as impact-driven businesses with old paradigm thinking. So I'm being provocative. I'm not being directive. I'm just suggesting, what if we went back to the design and in the business plan? And what I might do, actually, if someone's willing to volunteer, I've just thought of this now, because this is what I love to do when I'm mentoring too. It's like, if someone wants to volunteer, we could even take your business and use this as a map, and that would inspire everyone else in the room to start to map out, so this is essentially a business planning tool. So I'll just bring it up again, and then you can think about whether you want to volunteer or not. I'm just looking at the time. Yes, we can go to, I want to finish for you all before 1, because I know some things that people got things at 1. Okay, Jess, you've got your hand up. Is that for a question or to volunteer?
I just wanted to understand a bit more about the natural capital, what you mean by that.
Yeah, thank you. So natural capital is what we've taken for granted. We assume that we just have to tap into the water, tap into the air. We can output smog because that's part of industry, and that affects the air quality. But oh well, that's a consequence. And we've taken for granted that water, air, soil can just be bought and purchased. And it's a bill, it's a utility bill that we pay. So natural capital was a conversation that started coming up. I don't think Paul Hawkins was the first one, but I do remember his great book called Natural Capital back in 1999. And just this idea that, and some people don't like the word because it's like, why connect nature and capital together? But it's just bringing your attention to the fact what natural resources are inherent to your business that you might just be thinking of as a utility bill right now. And the example I gave for those, I don't know how many people here were at the Better Business Summit and saw my talk there, but the example I gave there was a beer business in Suffolk at the end of last year. 99% of beer is water. Okay. And the local county said, you can't use any more water. You're using too much. We've got to, and they were like, what? Well, okay, we're going to have to truck water in. And they're like, yeah, no, you actually can't truck on these roads. So there was a business suddenly facing a natural capital crisis, which is essentially what we call now a nature risk strategy, because corporations are used to risk strategies. So with the climate crisis, it's like, we're not going to be able to have enough cocoa to make our Mars bars. We better have a nature risk strategy. So natural capital is connected to what we're now seeing, nature risk strategy. Does that make sense? Yeah, thank you. Long answer, but yeah, you got it. So every business relies on some kind of natural capital, even if it's my cups of tea from my tap. It's the ginger in my tea. Where did this ginger come from? Where did I buy it from? Yeah, so it can be in our, because I'm a sole trader essentially that works with other consultants, and I essentially work from home and co-working. Digging into my natural capital is quite interesting, but it exists. I use it. So, and Heather's here. She's great at writing impact reports, so she'd have more to say on that as well. Okay, so another quick showing of this, and you're welcome to take a screenshot, and I can send you the slides if you like, and this recording. Where would you start? Another person has asked. Which one would you start at? Honestly, it's a very intuitive exercise. Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. So Caroline, you would start where it felt good. So you would find, I would invite you to wander around the page, just sort of see where your eyes naturally land. And then you'll just start to get an energy on one of the words, or you might ask a question, which was just done. I love this one because it's like, this is what I use instead of a threat. So I don't like that SWOT analysis thing. It's like, we can talk about uncertainties, and that's actually a big part of most businesses now. Also like the way I made it fit into the circle, because it gives a nice play on words. So yeah, you start with what feels good. So if we have a volunteer, we might get around 2 or 3 of the circles, but so who would like to volunteer? That's okay. We don't need to have one. Yeah. So Rebecca, as you say, you know the process. So we'll see if anyone else wants to have a go. Sorry, I can't see everyone, so forgive me. So
I'm happy to, but I don't know which one to do. I got many of them.
I will be your facilitator and guide. Rebecca, if you could be my timekeeper, it's 12:46, and can you just tell me when it's 12:51, please? Thank you. Okay, so just let your eyes rest around the circle and just see which one sort of speaks to you.
People.
People, okay. Give us 1 or 2 lines about what your business is, just so everyone has context.
I'm trying to think which one to use, which business to use.
Do your trouser one. Do the Sandura one.
Do the Sanjo one, okay, because we have, we're using some natural capital there, I guess, yeah. So yeah, if we look at Sandra Stories, it's a co-created a fashion brand, and which is fully regenerative and circular. The people in the business are a part of our ecosystem collaborative, and we came together to co-create this business. So there's about 5 or 6 of us now. It's kind of growing a little bit more. So people who have really deep knowledge and connections with regenerative cotton, people who are really great at marketing, because we needed that specialism. Myself on design and architecting of the business and the item. Some people in natural dyes, and have I missed anyone? No, I think for now that's most people. Yes.
Okay, amazing. So just listening to you, what I would say is, the fact that you started with people and you didn't say we need to get people. You were like, you were literally like galvanizing a community from day one. You're like,
Yes.
who already exists? Now, this already is a regenerative way of thinking, because a traditional way might be, well, who do we need to employ, and what's the budget, and what skills do they want, and how long will they stay for, and go to conferences about how Gen Z don't want to stay in a job for more than, like it's a whole other way of thinking. Whereas
Yeah.
you, from the very beginning, so I love that you focused on people. This tells me straight up that this is a business all about people, but not just
100%.
people. It tells me this business knows inherently that it is connected to a bigger ecosystem, because you started talking about natural dyes and certain skills. And so I would say people are the heart of this business, just from that short.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the community around it who are going to be the buying club, who will support this business as it grows.
Well, because you started with people, the community naturally came next for you.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
again, in a traditional business model, a fashion brand might go, right, yeah, and let's create a community. Yeah, and then the community can do this and they can be our influencers. That's a whole different way of thinking. So if you want to map a regenerative business, it's like you may feel really challenged by this idea of how I can start with people. You weren't. You found it very natural to start there. But if I was to say, here's your regenerative business planning map, you, this really challenges some people. I was just with someone who was like, community, like they were really struggling with that.
Yeah, it's alien to me now, but yeah.
They just were trying to invent something. I'm like, no, 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 no. Let's just come back. Let's just come back and see what wants to come from this, because I believe each entity actually wants to become something. It's part of it, has its own life, and part of our job is to listen to that. So I love that. I love that. I feel like, and so then you look at when we go around to things like the value comes to me next. The giving is naturally in there. You are giving within. This is not like we're going to buy charity, whereas it can be, by the way. But imagine building that in from the beginning. So you are building. Thanks.
12:51.
Yeah, fantastic. So, we've had a volunteer who has done this very naturally, but I'm actually glad you came forward with your story, because it shows people how it can be done. And this is what actually doing it differently means. So it's not that at some stage we don't get to look at, because anyone who's worked with me knows I'm a big fan of running a business from a spreadsheet at some point, but it's not the only way. It's part of the trunk. It's part of the strength of a business. You need to protect it. Part of protecting your people is to protect income and processes. But we don't start there. We don't make it all about that and go, oh, well, we'll just have to compromise on our natural capital for now until we figure it out. What if from the beginning you went, how can we make this fundamental to what we do?
Yeah, and we worked with the natural capital that was available, that was with the connections from the people. And we like our marketing person, she likes to say that we're radical idealists, because there's many, or everything that we've done is as the best that we could potentially do with what we have, right? And it's like non-toxic, nothing's on it. It's thought about in the design and the evolution, the regenerative roots of the cotton itself, and the links to tradition and history with the Gandhi connection, which is and it's just been really beautiful to actually design something, design a business and brand and product that focuses on those radical idealist sort of values, I guess, stories. Yeah. So yeah.
So already we're coming to time. Thank you so much, Rachel. That was brilliant. And just to get a sense from everyone in the room, with this short time we've had together, just with a show of hands, up here is like, I totally get this, or I kind of get this, or I'm not getting it, just so I can get a sense of where you are. Can I just get a sense of, yeah, okay, good. That's good. Yeah, move it. It's a fluid thing. That's fine. Good. This is helpful. All right, fantastic. So no one's not getting it. Carly, did you have a question?
I'm not sure how good the sound is where I am, but I don't know if you remember last week I asked, I love this, but not everybody is doing it like this. So how do we survive in this kind of liminal space between seeing what needs to happen and observing what's actually happening at the moment while driving towards these pictures of the future?
Yeah, we have inspirational people doing it and talking about it and sharing their stories and sharing their challenges and coming to spaces like this and walking away with one more little insight and trying something different. That's how we do it. It's all we've got, but that's actually a lot. So the will. So this comes down to, you would have seen in what's the purpose, what's the why. I didn't say vision. I didn't use that word. A vision will come from the purpose and the why. It's like, why do this? It's like, because man, things are really like, it's got to change. Like, what do you mean why? So everyone will have a why. Then how that manifests is like just turning up. Just keep turning up, Carly. That's how you do it. Talk to people, go to events. How are you doing it? What did you do?
I love that you say that's all we've got. That's all we've got, and it's a lot. I like it.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, beautiful. We're out of time. You can tell I love to do this in a much deeper way. We do it in like longer workshops. If you ever want to do something like that, with just reach out to me. We take a proper couple of hours to do this. You have to pay me for those, of course. And then we do this in the growth experience over a 9-month period and I know some of you are going to hang around and talk to me about that because it actually does take time. And to answer your question in a more serious way, Carly, this stuff can be pretty challenging and confronting. And without being in a community, but also then having that direct personal problem solving, I personally think a combination of direct mentoring with a community, with learning, when you combine that together, but you do it with deep nature immersion, we've got to stop trying to do this intellectually and academically. This is why you'll always see me going, come into nature's boardroom with me, come and spend a day with me here. In fact, I think I have a slide on that. You've just reminded me. So I should probably do that just to be, a bit business-like. I'm very passionate about this stuff. So let me I'll share you links afterwards, but basically we've got a couple of days coming up. We've got one in Avebury on the 19th of March. This is a very, very special place. You can come and spend the day with us to do some forest bathing and regenerative business design in one of the most magical places in Britain. And there's the growth experience. You're welcome to hang around and have a chat to me about that now. I've got another one coming up in London. I'll send you the links. And there's one in Glastonbury in September. So it's powerful stuff. I think you do have to do, and I always say it's not a walk with the dog in the woods. Like keep walking your dog in the woods. That's important. But you've got to be in the woods yourself without the animals, to be with the wildlife, to be with what's around you. And in a facilitated process, it's really powerful. So whether it's with me or someone else, it's something, I think it's pretty hard to be a regenerative business without doing that. I really do. So that's it for today. Any last questions? See, it was short and sweet, but hopefully inspirational. What's one thing? Just say in the chat, what's one thing you might do as a result of being here today? Let's just end in that way. Retrofit, yeah. Yeah, Caroline, the forest bathing, feel free to hang around. I can tell you a bit more about that. Architect more, lovely. Think of the roots. Yes, Virginia. Trust the process. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of alchemy there. Let's end on, that's a beautiful place. Thanks, Rosalie. Thank you, Hannah. Mapping, yeah, and mapping creatively, designing. We're taught to draw at school and then suddenly we weren't allowed to draw anymore. What was that about? Thinking about creating the abundant conditions. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to finish with a short story. Put your hand up if you've seen the film Wilding or read the book by Isabella Tree. Anyone read or seen the film? Okay, the rest of you, treat yourself, honestly. It's incredible. And I want to tell one little story from that film in terms of the alchemy, because sometimes people go, what do you mean alchemy? But we've all experienced a bit of magic in our lives. So the story is there's a point in their journey, about 8 years in, where they've got this, you'll have to remind me the name, I think it's ragwort, it's really toxic weed, and they think the whole project's going to fail. They're 8 years in, they've put up with so much opposition, everyone thinking they're mad, so many trials and tribulations, the most challenging journey of their lives, and now the farm is absolutely riddled with ragwort, and they're going to get shut down, they're going to have to stop the process, and out of nowhere, something like 10 million butterflies show up from Africa, and they land on this plant, and they not only eat it till it's all gone, the roots get eaten and it never ever comes back. And that project went on to become the KNEP, KNEPP, which you can all visit now, and is one of the most iconic rewilding projects that have sparked a whole movement. So that's alchemy, but it's also nature and it's also science. So trust the process. That came from Rebecca's comment. Trust the process. So do see that. It's very inspiring. Thank you very much. Please hang around if you want to talk to me about forest bathing or anything else. Otherwise, thank you for being here and enjoy the rest of your magical day. Stay in touch. I'll send you some links and send you the slides. Thank you. Bye. I'll just hang around for those who want to.
Hey, Janine.
Hi, Heather.
How are you?
Really good, darling. Great to see your beautiful face again. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Likewise. That was really good. I really enjoyed that. And
Excellent.
yeah, I really liked the circa. I took a screen grab of it.
Oh, good. Great.
So I
And
could
I'll
have
send
a
you the
think
slides too.
about that. But yeah, no, it's good. There was your comment just about NEP there. Your example reminded me of another one. I don't know if you've seen a film called The Biggest Little Farm.
Oh, rings a bell. I can't quite think of it. Yeah.
It was in California. This kind of film producer couple took on this farm, which was just like sand in California, and they regenerated it. They started out with worms, a wormery, to create like good soil and that kind of stuff. And it was amazing. And basically they kind of you follow them as they go through all these things like planting different things, planting the farm, planting and then dealing with pests and then dealing with all sorts of different things that happen to the crops and so on. And it kind of takes, I think it was 7 years for kind of everything to even out. Because obviously there's human intervention. So they intervene, they put a load of fruit trees there. The birds then go, oh, great, loads of fruit trees. We're going to eat all those fruit trees. And then they get overrun by snails and things like that. And they keep trying to think, like, what would nature do? What would nature do? So they do things like they introduce ducks. So rather than getting something to kill the snails, like a pesticide or something, they bring ducks in and ducks eat the snails, and then ducks fertilize the soil beneath the trees and and all this kind of, but it kind of, it was like every year they had a new problem because they'd intervened in nature and they'd done things and it created a new problem. And then they thought about how nature how you'd solve it in the most natural way possible. And actually, after about 7 or 8 years, it all kind of harmony was restored because they had the balance. They got the balance. It was incredible. It's a really good film.
Oh, wow. So the
biggest little farm.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, we need these inspiring examples. Whoever asked earlier, Carly, I think that was you. Caroline, what do you want to know about forest bathing?
I'm going to dive off anyway,
Thanks,
but thank
Heather.
you,
Thank you
Janine.
so much for that.
Bye.
Bye. I'll stop recording as well. I'm glad I caught that story.